Hey everyone, welcome to Complex Engineer, where we talk about everything software development from cloud to backend and DevSecOps, just best practices around building production grade software. We're starting a new series on Monorepo. This will be the first video of our Monorepo series. Imagine you're a DevOps engineer or a software engineer who works at a fintech company called FinLotech, and your boss comes to you and say, we need to set up 4 projects for 4 different teams: a user profile project, payment and settlement project, a mobile app, and a web app teams. So you go to your version control, maybe GitLab or GitHub, anyone works. Then you set up the repos that you need for the teams. So you set up the user repo, let's just say this is built in Python. You set up the CI/CD. CI/CD just means continuous integration, continuous deployment. You set up the security scans that you need for that project. The development team picks it up from there. They set up their login strategy, how they want to format their logs, and maybe where they want to store their logs. Then they also set up dependency management, how they want to build the application, maybe using set up the PI, and maybe they have a requirement.txt where they store all their third-party dependencies, or maybe they have a YAML file where they store all the dependencies, and they use maybe Poetry to build the library that they're working on, or maybe it's a web API and they use Docker images and they build their API on Docker images. So they set up their Docker image, the Docker build, and the entire process for that. They also ensure that they have patch management schedule where they update their libraries, the third-party libraries they use regularly in case there's any security vulnerability. They go and update the library. They also set up versioning strategy. Maybe they use semantic versioning 1.0, 1.x, or 1.0 point something, whatever they use. Maybe they use date timestamp as well. This is just example in this case. Then you go on to set up the payment and settlement repo. You do the same thing you did for the user profile repo. You set up app repo, and you do the same thing. You also you would set up access control in this to say who has access to the repo. Just for instance, you go ahead to and set up the web app repo. And when you look at this, you kind of see where the problem is. Just take a moment and think about this. This is called a polyrepo. And the challenge here is that you have code duplication across the repos. So your CI/CD scans, your security scans, most of them are duplicated all across the repo. Of course, login is always subject to the language. Every language has their login libraries that they use. But when you compare the user profile repo and the payment repo in this case, you would have duplication. That login logic would have to be duplicated across the repos. Dependency management is another issue. You would have multiple places that you're storing the entire third-party libraries across 2 repos. And then imagine there is a security vulnerability. Now you have to jump from repo to go update that. And if the repos are just 4 repos, it's not much of a challenge. But as the repos grow, it becomes much difficult to know what library could be affected within your entire system. The same thing for patch management, and the same thing for versioning. Versioning can be really difficult because every time you're consuming an API, the question is what version of the API you're consuming. Your Git already gives you some form of versioning because it gives you a commit history, a commit hash, and then you add another layer of versioning every time you're deploying. So it becomes very difficult. Another problem too as well is the fact that you now have some form of silos across the team. Most teams will not be able to see what the other code base looks like. So there is always this level of silo, and there's very little to no knowledge sharing across the board because you don't have code visibility. If you're working on the payment and settlement team, most likely you have no clue of how the user profile code base looks like. And these are some of the problems of polyrepo. A possible solution is to use what's called a monorepo. And you could structure this in different ways. One of the ways you could structure this is by the language. So you could create a Python repo, and inside the repo you have different folders that corresponds to the project. And you could use the same idea for the TypeScript repo and have all the projects inside this repo and just create folders for this repo. Or you could use what some of the big tech use these days, a single repo, and then they have the entire project inside the repo. Monorepo comes with its own advantages, and like everything else, it comes with its own disadvantages as well. So some of the benefits you have in Monorepo is standardization, because you have all your folders inside one single repo. Your entire CI pipeline will look the same because now it's shared across that folder. So pretty much standard in this case. Also, you have easy refactoring. It's much easier for you to jump from folder to folder and make changes that you need at every point in time, provided you don't break the test. It's much easier compared to jumping from repo to repo. Clone down the repo, make the change. It's really difficult. It's just much easier folder to folder. Code visibility is also another benefit you enjoy, because now you have visibility across all the code for the project or the projects, multiple projects that you have. You don't need to jump from repo to repo. You don't have to deal with silos. You don't have to ask for access to gain, visibility across like a specific code base. You have visibility across it, provided you have controls in place to say who has ownership of this specific code base, who can change it, who can make PRs to this code base, and who can approve those PRs, things like that. Then you also have the benefit of patch management and inventory management as well. Once there's a security vulnerability, maybe any of the libraries that you use, you don't have to jump from repos to repo or ask developers for access and say, give me access to your repo, let me know what libraries you use and if those libraries are affected by the vulnerability. You go to the single file, maybe it's a requirement or text file, or maybe it's a single Gradle file that you use, or maybe a single package or JSON file, just depending on your language. You could go there and just see the third-party libraries that you're using, and you can make the change easily. Again, provided you don't break the test that you have in place. Code reuse is another benefit because you have visibility across the code base. You can easily just reuse the code. I've been in situations where some team don't even know that a piece of logic has been written by another team because it's entire different repo, and the teams just continue rewriting that logic over and over and over and over again. They rewrite the logic, they test that logic, and then they just create difficulties and slow down the entire project. While like every other thing that comes with its own advantages, Monorepo also comes with its own challenges. And one of the challenges that comes with is the fact that you have different build and deployment tools across languages. Maybe in Java, you could use Gradle build. In Python, you could use Poetry to build your project. And in JavaScript or TypeScript, you could use NPM to build your project. And this is a challenge because now you need to cater for those tools and know, okay, what language am I working with in this repo so that I can then use that build tool to build a project, right? So this is a challenge. Of course, you could use tools like Docker, which ensures that you build a single image for whatever you're building, but the challenge is still there. And then you have to deal with testing. Different languages also test different ways. NPM test for JavaScript, PyTest, then the folder you want to test, and then Java is like Gradle test. It's different, so you have to also accommodate for this difference in testing. The same thing with code coverage, security scans on this code. You have different libraries that handle security scans on this code. Of course, you could use maybe a tool like Coverity, but again, you still have that difference in languages that can be a challenge here. And the time to run the test, as the code base grow, it would take longer time to run your test. So your unit test, your integration test, your regression test, whatever test you have, because now you have more unit tests as the code base grow, it can really be very time consuming to run this test. Another challenge is dependencies. You have dependencies across the board because this is a single repo. You don't even know what's consumed by what. How do you know someone else is consuming the code that you wrote? How do you know a different team is actually reusing the code that you wrote? It's kind of difficult to tell because now you have a very large code base where everybody has access to that code base. Say for instance, you have an object declaration that you just declare. Maybe you declare a Pydantic class like in Python, or maybe you declare a Pojo class like in Java, or you just declare a type, maybe like in TypeScript, or a struct, but whatever it may be. And that struct contains a username and email. And someone changes username from username to uname, and you have other libraries or other teams that are consuming that within that same repo. If there's no test in place, you can't really tell that someone has changed it. And then you don't even know the impact of that change, right? Because you don't know who's consuming what folder or what library that you're writing in your code. And these are some of the challenges that comes with Monorepo. And this is where toolings comes in. And one of the tools that we have here that solves some of this problem is Bazel. Bazel was built by Google, and it's a really great tool. It comes with its own advantages as well as its disadvantages, like everything else. Pants is another tool that we have here in this space. I love Pants. I've used this tool a bit. I think it's a great tool, lots of potential, still growing to support other languages, but I think it's a great tool. I'm written for the Pants team. Turborepo is also another tool that solves the same challenge of Monorepo, and it's built with JavaScript and TypeScript in mind from ground to top. It's mainly support JavaScript and TypeScript. NX is another tool that supports mainly JavaScript. Of course, you have plugins here and there, but from ground up, it's built to support JavaScript and TypeScript. So there is a paradigm to it because it's built with JavaScript in mind. And that's why I kind of like Pants in this case. I will talk more about this in subsequent videos. So what repo structure should I use? Well, like every engineering question, it depends. It depends on the level of skill set of the team, depends on the resource allocation within the team, how much DevOps resource do you have, and how much time do you have to learn the tools for Monorepo. Do you have best practices in place like unit tests? Are your unit tests of good quality that you can bring in multiple teams into the same repo? What's the knowledge level of the teams you have around Git in case you have merge conflict? Do they have good understanding to actually deal with merge conflict? And things like that. Do they have coding best practice? The knowledge level of the team, and I think that's really important in adopting Monorepo, how matured is the DevOps team and the DevOps process that you have in place. And just in case you're still confused as to whether to use Monorepo or Polyrepo, well, remember that having a product is better than not having a product. More importantly, you want to focus on having a product in place and then building from there, right? Monorepo helps you to be productive as your code base grows, as your team grows. So it's very important to have a product than not having a product at all. And if you're stuck between which to still use, just keep it simple. Do Polyrepo for now, and as you grow, you begin to see those challenges that we talked about in the earlier slides, and then you can begin to adopt Monorepo into your code base. In the next video, we'll explore some of the Monorepo tools, write some code, we'll push it to GitHub and maybe GitLab, and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a feedback, leave a comment in the comment section below, and kindly subscribe and share the video. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.